Some rivers are so enormous that they cross entire countries, create natural borders, feed millions of people, and reshape the land for thousands of miles. But length alone doesn't tell their full story. From a South American river, connected to one of the world's greatest waterfall systems, to a Siberian waterway, frozen for much of the year, these are 7 extraordinary river systems that reveal just how powerful moving water can be. Welcome back to the TOP7. Let's begin our journey. Number 7. Parana River. Our journey begins in South America with the magnificent Parana River, stretching roughly 4,880 kilometers across the continent. It's the second longest river in South America, behind only the Amazon. The Parana begins in southeastern Brazil, where the Paranaíba and Rio Grande rivers meet. From there, it grows into a massive waterway and flows south, eventually forming part of the natural border between Brazil and Paraguay. One of the most dramatic transformations along its course occurs at the Itaipu Dam, one of the world's largest hydroelectric power facilities. The enormous structure is roughly 8 kilometers long and 196 meters high. Its reservoir plays a major role in electricity generation for Paraguay and Brazil. Farther downstream, the Parana forms part of the border between Paraguay and Argentina. Here, dense forests gradually give way to more open landscapes, while the river widens into a network of islands and wetlands rich in wildlife. And nearby is one of South America's greatest natural spectacles, Iguazu Falls. Technically located on a tributary of the Parana, this extraordinary system consists of around 275 individual waterfalls. Eventually, the Parana joins the Uruguay River to form the Rio de la Plata, an enormous estuary that opens into the Atlantic Ocean and reaches approximately 220 kilometers across, near its widest outer section. It's an incredible ending for a river that crosses such a huge part of South America. Number 6. Ob-Irtysh River System. Now we travel to Siberia, where one of the world's great river systems stretches across roughly 5,410 kilometers of an enormous and unforgiving landscape. The Ob begins in southern Siberia's Altai Mountains, at the meeting point of the Bia and Katun rivers. Fed by glaciers and melting mountain snow, its young waters flow north through spectacular valleys before reaching the vast West Siberian plain. But the Irtysh is what makes this river system truly exceptional. The Irtysh begins much farther south and travels through Kazakhstan before entering Russia. By the time it joins the Ob, it has already traveled more than 4,000 kilometers. After the rivers merge, the Ob continues northward, gradually becoming broader as it crosses the flat Siberian landscape. Finally, it reaches the Gulf of Ob and empties toward the Kara Sea, part of the Arctic Ocean. For much of the year, this northern region is locked beneath ice. But when the short Siberian summer arrives, the landscape transforms. Millions of migratory birds travel into the nutrient-rich wetlands to breed. It's one of the clearest examples of how a river can support life even in one of Earth's harshest environments. Number 5. Yellow River. Few rivers have played a greater role in shaping a civilization than China's Yellow River, also known as the Huanghe. Stretching about 5,464 kilometers across northern China, it has 2 very different reputations. It's celebrated as the cradle of Chinese civilization, but it has also been called China's sorrow because of the devastating floods that have occurred throughout history. The river begins high in the Bayanhar Mountains of Qinghai Province, where it starts as a clear mountain stream at an elevation of more than 4,500 meters. From there, it travels east before making a huge northern loop around the Ordos Desert. Then comes the feature that gives the river its famous color. As it passes through the lowest plateau, the water collects enormous quantities of fine, yellowish sediment. This material turns the river muddy yellow and has helped shape the surrounding landscape over countless generations. Farther downstream, the Yellow River passes through dramatic gorges and ancient rock formations before eventually reaching the Bohai Sea. For thousands of years, this river has brought both prosperity and destruction. And that contradiction is exactly what makes it one of the most important rivers in human history. If you're enjoying the journey so far, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We've still got 4 enormous river systems ahead of us. Number 4. Yenisei-Angara River System back in Siberia. Another colossal river system runs for approximately 5,539 kilometers toward the Arctic. The Yenisei-Angara system begins with one of the most extraordinary bodies of freshwater on Earth, Lake Baikal. The Angara is the only river that flows out of this ancient lake. It leaves Baikal with such force that parts of its upper reaches don't completely freeze, even during the brutal Siberian winter. As the Angara continues north, its immense energy is captured by a series of hydroelectric dams. One of the most impressive is the Bratsk Hydroelectric Power Station. Its construction created a gigantic reservoir extending for hundreds of kilometers, dramatically altering the natural river landscape. Farther downstream, the Angara joins the Yenisei system, and the combined waters continue north through the heart of Siberia. Eventually, they reach the enormous Yenisei Gulf before emptying into the Kara Sea. The estuary itself is immense, around 50 kilometers wide in places, and extending roughly 250 kilometers inland from the Arctic Ocean. From the deepest freshwater lake on Earth to the frozen Arctic coast, this is a river journey on a truly continental scale. Number 3. Mississippi-Missouri River System. Now we cross the globe to North America. Stretching approximately 6,275 kilometers, the Mississippi-Missouri system forms one of the continent's greatest waterways. The Missouri begins in Montana, where the Jefferson, Madison, and Gallatin rivers come together. As it travels east, it passes through spectacular landscapes, including the limestone cliffs known as the Gates of the Mountains. Farther downstream, dams have created enormous reservoirs such as Lake Sakakawea in North Dakota, transforming sections of the once wild Missouri while providing flood control, irrigation, and hydroelectric power. The Mississippi itself begins far more modestly at Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota. At its source, it's little more than a small stream. But as tributaries join it, everything changes. North of St. Louis, the Missouri meets the Mississippi, adding huge quantities of sediment-rich water. Farther south, the Ohio River adds even more volume. Eventually, the Mississippi reaches Louisiana, where it separates into multiple channels before entering the Gulf of Mexico. Along the way, it carries enormous quantities of sediment downstream, continuously reshaping its delta. What begins as small streams in the American interior ultimately becomes one of the most powerful river networks on the continent. Number 2. Yangtze River. At number 2 is China's Yangtze River. Stretching approximately 6,300 kilometers, it's the longest river in China and one of the longest on Earth. Its journey begins high on the Tibetan Plateau, where melting ice from the Gelidongdong Mountains feeds its headwaters at elevations exceeding 5,000 meters. The young river races through steep valleys before eventually reaching one of its most spectacular sections, the Three Gorges. For roughly 200 kilometers, the Yangtze cuts through towering limestone cliffs, creating a landscape that has inspired Chinese poets and artists for centuries. Today, this region is also home to the Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest hydroelectric power station. The dam created a reservoir stretching hundreds of kilometers upstream and dramatically changed both the river and the communities surrounding it. Farther east, the Yangtze widens as it crosses fertile agricultural plains, where rice fields and fish farms have supported dense populations for thousands of years. Finally, near Shanghai, the river forms a vast delta before emptying into the East China Sea. For hundreds of millions of people, the Yangtze isn't simply a river. It's an economic artery, a source of food and energy, and a defining feature of Chinese civilization. Number 1. Amazon River. At number 1 on our list is a river so powerful that length almost becomes secondary. The Amazon stretches roughly 6,400 kilometers across South America and carries more water than any other river on Earth. According to the source, its flow exceeds that of the next 7 largest rivers combined. Its journey begins high in the Peruvian Andes before entering the vast Amazon basin, which covers around 40% of South America. From there, the river expands through the world's largest tropical rainforest, creating an extraordinary network of channels, floodplains, lakes, and wetlands that shift as water levels rise and fall. One of its most remarkable sites occurs near Manaus, Brazil. Here, the dark waters of the Rio Negro meet the lighter, sediment-rich waters of the Solimões. Because the two rivers differ in temperature, speed, and density, their waters can flow side by side for several kilometers before finally mixing. But the scale of life surrounding the Amazon is even more astonishing. The source describes more than 2,500 fish species in its waters, and roughly 16,000 tree species throughout the surrounding rainforest. Eventually, this enormous river reaches the Atlantic Ocean, releasing an almost unimaginable volume of fresh water into the sea. The Amazon isn't simply one of Earth's longest rivers. It's the centerpiece of an ecosystem on a scale found nowhere else on the planet. Rivers are much more than lines on a map. They create habitats, power cities, shape landscapes, support agriculture, connect communities, and influence the rise of entire civilizations. And even today, measuring something as seemingly simple as a river's length isn't always straightforward. Sources, tributaries, shifting channels, erosion, dams, and different measurement methods can all change the final result. Which great river would you most like to see with your own eyes? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next journey across the incredible planet we call home. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.